A black person is shot, a horrific video is released, and a city erupts in anger. This is a deeply American script that's being played out right here in Minneapolis. But it's nothing new. Scenarios like this have been on repeat throughout the history of the United States. This week, we've heard several pleas for people in the streets to take their rage to the ballot box.
If you want change in America, go and register to vote.
But for some protesters, that might mean becoming the leadership themselves. In Charlotte, North Carolina, a city councilman named Braxton Winston was arrested last weekend while protesting the police killing of George Floyd. Winston's start in politics began in 2016 after a similar police killing in Charlotte. And if you're wondering what it looks like when protesters channel their anger into political change, Charlotte today may be the clearest example of that.
Come on out, y'all. Come on out. Come stand with the people.
Demonstrators in Charlotte clashed with police armed in riot gear. Hundreds taking to the streets with signs protesting the death of 43-year-old Keith Scott, killed Tuesday by police.
We got to change the way police are treated. They have to be accountable for every person they take out of this world.
Police in riot gear moved in to try and stop protesters from walking along Interstate 277.
I don't care who you vote for. Just vote for somebody who's going to do something.
In Charlotte, history was made when Vi Lyles was elected the first African-American female mayor.
A large number of key positions in local leadership are now held by African Americans.
Voters elected a younger, more diverse group to lead the city.
We have a bright future ahead.
After the police shot Keith Lamont Scott in 2016, major protests rocked the city. Voters took their anger to the polls and got rid of the old city leadership. The people of Charlotte shook up the city council and brought in a brand new guard, young and mostly black and brown.
We are ready, whenever you tell us.
I'm so nervous.
Showtime.
They also brought in a black DA and Charlotte's first ever black sheriff. And last year, they were largely re-elected.
Welcome, Dimple Ashmira at large.
Good evening, James Mitchell at large.
Good evening, I'm Vi Lyles, mayor.
The message from voters was clear. They wanted change. New representatives promised to answer the rage of protesters by tackling injustices in housing, jobs, and law enforcement in order to level the playing field for African Americans.
State of North Carolina.
So I contend that we will only truly be successful if this council over the next 2 years approaches our work on policy through a restorative lens.
But that's a tall order. The new leadership is trying to restructure a city literally built on segregation. When all this kicked off, Councilman Braxton Winston, a dad of 3, was working as a camera operator. He took to the streets and became a part of Charlotte's awakening.
The death of Keith Scott really was a spark that lit a fire on like a tinder bed that had been building up over time. And you gotta remember in September 2016, the year that we had experienced as a country. We were in the middle of a very contentious presidential election. The 2 years before that, I mean, you had Ferguson, you had Trayvon,
right.
And it was a long, long, hot summer.
On the afternoon of September 20th, Keith Lamont Scott was inside his car, waiting for his son's school bus to arrive when the police mistook him for someone they'd come to serve a warrant on.
Don't shoot him. He didn't do anything. Keith, don't you do it. Don't you do it. Keith, don't you do it.
The investigation determined the shooting was justified, and the officer police say shot Scott was not charged.
When I found out about the death of Keith Lamont Scott, I was on my way home from work. I'm like, it's right up the street. I'm gonna go see what happened.
But another man ain't coming home to his motherfucking kids or his wife.
They put his truck on the flatbed, and it was his voice. I'll never forget that voice. It was so shrill. I mean, the emotion of everything just changed. Like, it went silent for a second. So I started speaking up.
We are angry. You should be angry too. Are you guys angry?
We wanted the city council out there. We wanted the mayor out there. We wanted somebody that could help us answer these questions, and nobody was showing up.
And what were these questions?
How do you go from sitting in your car to a death sentence, you know? And how do we change that?
Black lives matter. Black lives matter.
You constantly tell us what we cannot do. We cannot kneel. We cannot march. So what can we do? Chief Kerr Putney, come out and tell us what we can do.
If you ran the world, what happens next?
Let's start over, because the system that we claim exists really does not exist. It's make-believe.
You were a protester. And now...
Concerned citizen.
Concerned citizen. Concerned citizen. I'll give you that. Now, you're an elected official. So how did you go from that to this?
I felt like I wanted to continue to be part of the change, figuring out what that meant, how to disrupt this idea of the status quo. Some people look at this shining city on top of a hill. At the bottom of the hill, there's a lot of folks that the folks up top can't see. We are a southern city. We hide our poverty.
It's pretty easy to see that segregation on the map. They actually have a name for it, the crescent and the wedge, with poorer people living in the crescent and wealthier people living in the wedge. It should come as no surprise that the same divide exists along racial lines.
There was a report published. They looked at upward economic mobility. And Charlotte was the lowest ranked city of all major cities. So basically it said that if you are born into poverty in Charlotte, you have less than a 7% chance of getting up to the highest ranks. It kind of gave us the verbiage to these things, these emotions that we were feeling out here. We were like, look, we're not bugging. We're gonna have to look at our zoning ordinances that have allowed for neighborhoods to be built so they're cut off from one another.
Right.
If we wanna stop us having a segregated city, we're gonna have to stop doing some of the things that have traditionally made some people feel comfortable.
Winston took us to one of those neighborhoods, West Charlotte. So where are we exactly?
This is Catherine Simmons Avenue. It's one of, if not the deadliest streets in Charlotte.
Smith was killed on Saturday on Catherine Simmons Avenue.
CNPD investigating a homicide right now on Catherine Simmons Avenue. Less than a month ago, police investigated another homicide on that exact same street.
What's up, brother? You doing all right?
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna see you around, I'm sure.
All right, man.
All right, brother.
Thank y'all, man.
For sure, bro.
What's your name?
Alzo.
All right.
What's your name?
I'm Fred.
Fred. Pleasure
Yeah.
to meet you, Fred.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
You know, this is a street that a lot of people hear about in Charlotte. They don't really connect. I'm Braxton Winston.
I know you are.
Yeah.
How you doing?
I was trying to explain to him about Catherine Simmons
Yeah.
and what's been going on over here.
This place looked like when I was 20 years old, coming over to get my little brother from school.
It's been the same. Like, you take a picture here now, 20 years ago.
This is the place my grandparents said you can't go. Man, we're forgotten, man. We're only remembered when it's time to give out the socks and the turkeys.
Do you feel like having a black mayor and majority
I don't
black...
think color has anything to do. I had compassion is the thing. I don't care what color you are. It doesn't really make a difference. We got a lot of y'all black folks up, ain't nothing changed when the white people's running. So what's the difference? We need compassion. If you want to be in there next year or year before, because I voted for you now, don't let me down. I'll bring some no's in there. Yeah, I watched you in some of the meetings. You're pretty swift. Let's come back over here. Play some basketball with the boys.
He can't play basketball.
Well, that'd be great. Lose, that'll make them feel better. They can brag on. I beat the council.
I'm teaching them
I
fundamentals.
I beat the council. That gives them something to brag about in school Monday morning. They beat you on the court. You know what I'm saying?
Charlotte's upward mobility for people at the bottom is not all that mobile, especially for black folks. And if the city can fix it, it'd be pulling off something the rest of the country hasn't figured out yet. But not everyone is rooting for them.
Racist, threatening letters mailed to at least a dozen Charlotte leaders.
That includes Mayor Vi Lyles, 6 city council members, 5 county commissioners, as well as members of the CMS school board.
The letter read in part, quote, "Each of you despicable black Democrats should be tarred and feathered and run out of my town on a rail."
Still, many of the new leaders have started to rewrite the maps. Taiwo Jayeba has a 20-year plan to rezone and integrate Charlotte. But selling it requires facing an audience that's heard some of this before.
Now, the comprehensive plan is what's supposed to guide our physical growth as a city. So that way, we're no longer a city defined as a wedge and a crescent, but rather our children and their children should be able to choose anywhere to live in this city.
It's wonderful to hear people articulate words that sound good. But at the end of the day, we want action.
Nothing has changed. Yes, thank you. We talk about inequality, we talk about 2040. That's too long. What is happening now?
You mentioned in your presentation that we should be able to move in any parts of the city. You know they don't want you there. So what are you doing to allow us to be able to move and not harass or feeling like police is gonna come when you're having a barbecue with your neighbors or your friends and your family?
You know, I can't control what the next door neighbor does, but I can at least control what happens on the land use side. I'm not promising you with this plan that things will change overnight, but I'm saying that this plan gives us that opportunity.
You must understand, you have some very concerned citizens here.
Jayeba came to Charlotte in 2015 after working as a city planner in Atlanta and Sacramento. As he plans for the city's future and the wave of new residents like him, he's looking at Charlotte's past.
I was at your Tuesday morning meeting, your breakfast. The number of engaging citizens there, yeah.
For me, I truly believe that one of the things that really strengthened segregation in the United States are zoning rules, zoning regulations that kept some people out of certain areas and put them in other areas. Redlining is a classic example of that.
For generations, redlining was used by banks to deny credit to people who lived in black neighborhoods. They would draw literal red lines around neighborhoods of so-called high credit risk, making it hard for black families to own homes and build long-term wealth. Zones considered medium risk were yellow and blue. And people who lived in green zones were able to easily access loans to become homeowners.
This area from south of our uptown to the south is what we call the wedge. This area here has the most expensive piece of real estate between Atlanta and DC.
So the rich folks?
Yes, rich folks, all right. It's also where we have the most population of white people. People who live in the crescent are more vulnerable to displacement.
So they keep getting pushed out.
Exactly. This is where you have the highest concentration of minority population in the city. This is also where you have the least accessibility to full-service grocery stores or banks.
You want to make it to where there's no distinction between this and this.
I would love to. In an ideal situation, if we were to get into a situation where we rezone the entire city to allow townhomes, duplexes, triplexes in different parts of our city, that breaks segregation. At least it begins to.
Yes.
And then it can also generate more affordable housing units. So therefore you have people of mixed race and mixed income and mixed generation can actually live in the same community.
You see what I'm saying? I completely see what you're saying. I mean, and it sounds amazing, but it don't sound easy because most people, the first thing they want to know is what? Schools.
Yeah.
And so if I'm coming here and I have the means, I'm going to ask where the best schools are. I would imagine they're here in the wedge, right?
In the wedge, yes.
So that continues to perpetuate the problem that you're talking about.
So we've been working with Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools to determine what's their out-year projection. Are we going to get it perfectly right? I don't think so, but we can influence it.
The crescent and the wedge were formed by years of segregation, but Charlotte's divide has grown deeper as wealthy families continue to concentrate around the top-performing schools. And that's not all. 4 predominantly white suburbs of Charlotte are now considering breaking away from CMS, the Charlotte school system. A state law passed in 2018 allows them to create their own publicly funded school systems. Some city leaders have called it another instance of white flight.
We cannot sit idly by and let legislators take us back to the 40s and 50s.
When we met Charlotte's Mayor Vi Lyles after the swearing-in ceremony, she told us she was concerned about the message lawmakers were sending to inner-city kids and their families.
What they're trying to do is siphon off the majority of students that are white into charter schools and say that we can't learn. I don't believe that. If we end up giving up on ourselves, then that will be our loss.
And our, is?
If black people decide our kids can't learn, if they decide black kids can't learn, then we are at a loss.
We met with one of the main advocates of the new bill. A former member of the school board, Jim Puckett, is now running for his old seat as county commissioner. He says that diversity should not be an educational priority. He lobbied to have his hometown of Huntersville, which is about 75% white, join the bill.
Is this one of your favorite dining locations?
You'll know why when you go inside. Now, what's bad is I don't get to be here as much as I want.
Wait, that's you?
That's me. And that's my old Democratic nemesis.
Look, they got you, got the ball.
That's me.
On you. You want the counties that you represent to break away from the Mecklenburg public school system?
Yes, I would love to see there be a North Mecklenburg school district, a South Mecklenburg school district, and a City of Charlotte school district.
That word secession comes.
Except secession, except that they're very diverse.
It's my understanding that Huntersville is majority white. Is that not the case?
It's, I don't know what the breakdown is. I'm going to guess that it's probably somewhere in the 70% white, maybe 65%. I should know
70%, that's a lot.
It is.
If you break away from the Mecklenburg school system and become your own school system, it sounds like a white school system.
No, it sounds like a diverse school system. Looks like
over 70%?
The thing for me is race is irrelevant. I don't care about that part of it.
But to you, you don't care about it.
One of the problems with this, with diversity also, it's hard to believe there's a problem with diversity. But when I bring in bright kids with high test scores, they cover the failure of the school.
What Puckett is referring to is the school integration of the 70s. After a Supreme Court ruling, the city developed a busing system that took students from different neighborhoods and brought them to mixed schools of all races and economic backgrounds. For 30 years, CMS was a national symbol for integration, but not everyone liked it. After one swift lawsuit from an unhappy white family, busing was overturned in 1999 with the help of Puckett, who was on the Board of Education at the time. Since then, wealthy families have largely abandoned Charlotte public schools, where now only 27% of students are white.
When federally forced busing ended in Mecklenburg County, West Charlotte was one of the top schools in the nation. The next year, when the wealthy kids left, the school became a failing school. Were the poor African-American kids that were left there, did they over summer become failures? Or was it just that when you took away all of the winners?
Careful.
I'm with you.
Careful. I mean, if you're associating white students with winners.
Now I'm talking about, and it wasn't white. It was white and black. It was social. It was wealthy kids. In fact, it was among the wealthiest kids in Charlotte. But it was really a fake school. It was a school within a school. The minute I start talking about this, and you go, look, you're a middle-class white guy who wants to leave the black kids. No. But you know what? Even if that were the case, if what I end up with is an inner-city school system that now doesn't see suburban parents as the silver bullet to their children's education, that's a big plus.
But if you're taking dollars away from that school system, does that not deplete the resources of the schools?
It can. There's no doubt about that. I call failure for failure. And if the Board of Education is afraid to admit they failed kids, then they're never going to get over that. You got to get past that. And you got to get past the fact that some people are going to call you a racist. Fine, I'll die being labeled a racist if I get something accomplished.
Racist is exactly what two Huntersville parents are calling the new school bill. Backed by the NAACP, they're suing the state of North Carolina over the bill, which they say was designed to exclude non-white students living outside the towns. West Charlotte High graduate Justin Perry calls it a struggle against forces of oppression that keep reinventing themselves. Have you heard of Jim Puckett?
I have.
Why are you grinning like that? It seems like it's a lot behind that grin.
No, hey, I grew up
behind
here.
that grin?
No, I mean, Jim Puckett been in office since I was in high school. So like he actually has it as a source of pride that he helped end quote unquote forced busing. Busing was never meant to just punish somebody. It was done as a remedy of addressing systemic racism, redlining, and things like that happened before.
In January, Charlotte schools created an equity committee to address the scholastic failure of low-income kids. Perry sits on the committee.
For me, the goal is to really work to try to hold the district accountable in terms of how we utilize resources, and how we make sure that opportunity is available in all schools, not based on your zip code.
Maybe get it back to as close as possible to where it was when you were in school.
So the reality is you're not gonna have the same black-white split and everything else, because now you have black, brown, white. But what I can say is that with genuine work, we absolutely can bring about creating a space where people can move to any neighborhood and have access to high-quality education.
I feel like Charlotte prided itself at one point as being the model city for school integration.
That was our identity.
Yeah. As soon as busing ended, families retreated into their already segregated neighborhoods.
Riley, come eat your breakfast.
Working class parents like Ramatu Swore now have to enter their kids into a lottery system to get them into the highest performing schools. One of her daughters got into the school she wanted.
It's cold out here. Bye. Have a good day.
The other one didn't. The older sister, Ramaya, now attends her neighborhood school, West Charlotte High. Riley, the youngest, travels 2 hours every day by car and bus to a school in Myers Park, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the Wedge. Maya, what's up?
Hey.
How you doing?
Good.
Just getting out of school?
Mm-hmm.
The reputation of this school right now is what?
Most gangbangers go here, and most people who go here tend to get in trouble and get arrested and stuff at young ages.
And what's the racial makeup of this high school?
I say 80% African American, and then maybe 20% other races.
So if you had your choice, you wouldn't be at West Charlotte?
Yeah.
You be where?
Philippa Berry.
And what makes that school better than this one?
They have a technology program.
Ah, and you want to be what in life?
Nuclear engineer.
A nuclear engineer. So yeah, you smart for real.
Between my two girls, there is a clear divide between the type of education they receive at either of their schools.
Explain that to me.
So with my youngest daughter, she goes to Myers Park Traditional. The atmosphere, the culture there is something totally different. The amenities, the type of activities or field trips and just the things that they are exposed to is on a whole nother greater scale than those of which my 16-year-old daughter goes to West Charlotte. She's just going to these classes and just sitting there for periods of time.
The youngest daughter, how old is she?
8.
Is it your desire that she maintains this trajectory?
That's tough because I also want her to be with people who look like her, if that makes sense. Because I want her to be able to be proud of who she is and not think that success just comes from the
Being
color of
around
your...
white people.
Right.
You want her to know her folks.
Right. But it's sad. It really is, especially comparing it to my education. It was more like black, brown, white, Asian,
Gray,
Hispanic,
green, blue,
green, everybody.
poor,
just,
rich.
Right,
Mhm.
right. And the experience was just more, it was a whole lot better. You didn't see just blacks hanging out with blacks. Like everybody commingled, and you know, we still friends today.
Would you say that your daughter at West Charlotte is not experiencing the same level of education that you did in high school?
No, not at all. So you can't just say that it's black parents don't care. Because as many as you say that one doesn't care, there's 10 that does. I mean, sometimes the parents can't involve themselves in the way that schools like in Myers Park, where you have stay-at-home moms. We are middle-class Americans trying to keep our head above water.
When you see how integration came to Charlotte and how fast it was taken away, it gives a lot of context to the anger that took over the streets after the Keith Lamont Scott shooting. For Charlotteans living paycheck to paycheck in the Crescent, it can sometimes seem like the rest of the city doesn't want them to succeed.
Charlotte is a city that is conflict averse. And so they may be socially progressive, but economically, they're not necessarily as progressive. I think that's a conversation that this country's having right now, right? Because it's one thing to say, hey, I don't like using slurs. It's another thing to say, I'm gonna acknowledge the roots of injustice that have created these huge gaps of inequity, and I'm gonna take economic means to address these things.
Charlotte has something big going for it. It's got a wealthy tax base that could help patch the inequity gap. A financial boom in the 80s and 90s helped turn it into one of the country's fastest growing cities. Sports has been a part of that growth. They got a football franchise in '96 and a Major League Soccer team this year. But it was the NBA and the Hornets in '88 that really put Charlotte on the map. Winston has been filming games here since the arena opened in 2005.
This is where a city councilman works? in the Hornets arena?
This is where Braxton Winston works.
Does having an NBA franchise play a significant role in attracting businesses and more money to the city to help you do what you do?
So it definitely helps. So for instance, with the new Major League Soccer that's coming in, we have set aside $110 million in developing 2 areas. If we play our cards right and we have the proper strategy, which I think we do, we can help bring that along.
Boost.
Yeah, you get more done. That's how you got to look at things, is how do you partner with the people that want to be in your city to advance the priorities of the common good of the city and not just those individual business people.
And one man was instrumental in transforming Charlotte from a mid-sized southern city into the second biggest banking center in the United States.
I see a lot of grenades in here.
I used to give grenades to people when they were outstanding service. And I had this habit of sitting with the grenade and I'd pull the pin out and be trying to put it back in. It make people nervous.
Well, I would think so.
Through a series of mergers, Hugh McCall turned his bank, the North Carolina National Bank, into the nationwide Bank of America. Since leaving the helm in 2001, he's continued to operate investment funds from their headquarters in Uptown Charlotte. But he's also made a new kind of investment, raising money for affordable housing in the Crescent and backing black leaders who want to lift that part of the city.
Someone told me that you built this city.
So I didn't build every building, but maybe 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 of them. We did everything we could to build the city. We built all of our buildings here, our operations centers here, everything. We even financed towers for our competition because we wanted the city to grow. This city prides itself on always being forward-thinking, and we were stunned to find that we'd been ranked 50th out of 50 on upward mobility for people born into poverty. That sort of offended our self-image. And so everybody in the city has been working on that since then.
What was missed that you all didn't see?
Without anybody really paying any attention, we resegregated ourselves on a socioeconomic basis. None of us can plead innocence to that. I mean, in other words, it was just not looking, not really paying attention. I don't think we understood the intensity of it and the depths of the problems.
One could say that these inequities that have been established in Charlotte are a result of banking and all this money coming in and ignoring parts of the communities of Charlotte that have been neglected.
Well, let's first correct what you said.
Please do.
We aren't responsible for it. The bank is not. To the contrary, we built more affordable housing than anybody in this country.
When you look at the separation of rich and poor in Charlotte, white and black in Charlotte, the crescent and the wedge, some of these things seem to be by design.
Well, yes, but all these people that are living in this, let's say, affluent area don't work for this bank. It's easy to blame the successful people for other people's lack of success, but that isn't the right way to try to solve the problem. The right way to solve the problem is to help people get a leg up.
Charlotte now has a lot of black leadership.
Right, very good black leadership.
So you have the money and you have the leadership. Do you think the city of Charlotte has the will to fix the inequities of the past?
Well, I think we have the will. I think the question of the money is not quite as simple as you put it, because we're talking about generations of wealth and the lack of creating wealth. But having said that, I think they're all in there trying. So we feel like we can solve our problem, to answer your question. It's not going to get done overnight. Anybody tells you they can do something overnight is just whistling Dixie.
Not everyone in town saw the Charlotte uprising as a wake-up call. Pat McCrory was mayor for 14 years and governor of North Carolina during the Keith Scott shooting. From his new pulpit on one of Charlotte's most popular morning radio shows, he continues to appeal to the city's Republican core.
You want to interview me? Why do you want to interview me? I'm a has-been mayor and governor.
Man, listen, modesty does not look good on you, Mr. McCrory. You one of the boss hogs of North Carolina, and I imagine you're not done in politics. That's a conversation for another day. But
so real quick, I'd love to hear from people who come from the outside into Charlotte. What's your initial impression?
Throughout history, you guys have been a model, especially when it comes to integration. You guys went
through a very tough time.
And so I think the fact that Charlotte is rich and it is diverse, it kind of serves as a model for what the rest of the country looks like.
Well, my goal for Charlotte was always to be big city opportunities with a small town environment.
A small town sounds delightful, but Charlotte is not exactly Mayberry. And the divide between the black community and the police is what led to riots while McCrory was governor. When you were governor, the death of Keith Lamont Scott happened, and that resulted in riots. How did that make you feel?
I was watching it on TV from the governor's mansion, seeing my city being rocked by literally only 300 people. I had to make a very difficult decision to call the National Guard. My security people said we can see through the internet that this is being well coordinated, and that there was even some interference from radical groups who wanted to cause disruption and violence.
But were you surprised that there were protests bubbling underneath the surface?
There's always been racial tension in this city, as all cities. We gotta go.
Cool.
When there is more violence, you also tend to have more police shootings because you have especially young officers and more inexperienced officers on edge. When I was mayor, I had like 5 or 6 within a 3-month time period, and our city was at a boiling point.
And the connection that you make between the two is that when that kind of crime increases, then police officers are on edge.
When violent crime increases, The police also are on much more of an edge. They're nervous. They're worried about their own life.
Which doesn't justify it.
Nothing justifies it, but you have to understand it. We have to understand they're human too.
Another deadly weekend in the Queen City.
So far this year, 102 people have been murdered. That's compared to 58 in all of 2018.
Ramatu Soare has seen the ebbs and flows of violence in Charlotte throughout her life.
Summer of '93, I remember going outside. It was before 8:30 because Cosby Show was coming on, and I heard tires screeching, saw some people running, but it didn't dawn on me like as a 9-year-old. Then when I kind of like got back to my group of friends, 2 shots rang out and I got hit by one of them.
Wow.
But even with that, it just wasn't an everyday experience. So like now, something simple as going to the mall on Christmas Eve, you could potentially lose your life. It just makes me fearful to even sending my child to school.
What is the relationship between the Black community and Charlotte Police Department now?
I don't think there's trust. I don't think there's transparency. And I just believe people have lost hope that things are gonna get better, that things are gonna change. I don't really see the police presence a lot. I don't even see the police chief presence a lot.
We've reached out to the Charlotte Police Department to speak to Chief Putney, and for 3 months we tried. They tried to give us someone else, but we wanted to speak directly to him about the relationship between the police department and the community. But yeah, we struck out. No.
I'm not surprised. Like when I was in school, we knew Officer James. He was our resource officer. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like we had relationships with him. You doing straight? You all right? You staying out of trouble? You know, that kind of thing. You don't see that anymore.
After the death of Keith Lamont Scott in 2016, there were protests. Now you have majority minority city council, you have Black mayor, you got black city council members, Black police chief. Do you see this Black leadership at all as a sign of progress?
No, I don't. Just electing Black officials or Black, city council, Black police chief, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're gonna come in and save the Black population. Just right after Keith Lamont Scott, you had the young man who lost his life at Burger King. It was just a police officer who, I guess, was startled, fearful, or what have you. But in that line of work, you cannot be scared. I mean, not necessarily you can't be scared, but you're there to protect and serve, and every person isn't a threat.
I'm crossing. Get out of the way. Sir, put the gun down. Put it down. Put the gun down. He's got a gun.
Her son, my cousin, Danquarius Franklin, was shot and killed up here. He was at the front door. He was kneeling down like this when the police arrived. The video shows him sitting there in the most vulnerable position you can be in, and that's in a praying position. The guy that he was talking to was a minister, and when they arrived, they began to give him commandments to do something that he couldn't do, and that was to drop the gun. He didn't have a gun in his hand. He had put the gun away, and they kept screaming, put the gun down, put the gun down, put the gun down. So I think he decided, okay, I'll do what she said, and he took his index finger and his thumb, reached in, and he pulled it up about 1/2 millimeter, and she shot him. And at that time, he looked at her and said, well, you told me to, and he died.
Shots fired. I shot a fire.
Danquarius Franklin was shot and killed by a CMPD officer after police received 911 call saying Franklin was armed with a gun at Burger King on Beatties Ford Road.
Investigators say the man who died may have gone to that fast food restaurant because he was upset that his child's mother was dating someone there.
What do you think this tragedy says about the relationship between the community of West Charlotte and the police department?
He was trying to comply, but he left here in a body bag. 2 weeks later, a white guy goes over to UNC Charlotte. He shoots 6 people, kills 2, and he walks out in handcuffs. So to me, there's a double standard.
They were not able to get a police record, a snapshot, nothing on Dan Quayle because that wasn't Dan Quayle. He was a wonderful person. He really was smiled and light up the world. He was just a wonderful guy.
When you look at what happened when they took his life, you could see a young man that had realized he had handled a bad situation the wrong way. And they come on the scene and escalated a de-escalated situation.
You all are from Charlotte.
Natives.
Native Charlotteans. Did you ever think something like that would take place?
The sad thing is it happened a lot over here. This is like, if you say, I live in West Charlotte, people's eyes rise. I keep his class ring on because so I can just have him close to me every day. I never take this ring off because I got to have him close to me because I miss my baby so much.
No matter how much progress the city is making, it all looks futile when black men keep getting shot.
What we gonna do? Shut it down!
And when the body cam video of the shooting came out, it looked like it was gonna be Keith Scott all over again. This time, Winston was in office and people were looking to him for answers. It was the death of Keith Scott that sparked this revolution that led you to be in office at City Council.
Yeah.
Now you're in the position of the person that you wanted to talk to when you were that concerned citizen.
Look, I was out in the street asking for the police chief to get fired and the mayor to do things. I did not know how my government was set up. I was civically ignorant about the things that needed to be done.
You responded to the death of Keith Scott one way, but now you're in City Council. How do you respond to the death of Mr. Franklin?
Well, honestly, I did it in a similar fashion. I went to see what was going on and listened, to the people who were showing up.
And did the folks there have questions in the same way you had questions?
Absolutely.
And were you able to answer them in a way that you would have thought satisfactory when you were out there as a concerned citizen?
You would have to ask them how satisfied they were.
Me and my colleagues, have been convening amongst ourselves and talking this through. And we believe strongly in the leadership that is amongst us and the work that we're doing.
We became aware of a couple different policies that needed to change. Now, CMPD does give all of the footage to the courts. We also saw in that video that that man was laying down there far too long without getting any first aid. We made changes to our training policy around first aid. We dispatch medic and fire now along with it. We have recently made changes to our use of force policies. And a lot of that has come out of the way, not just Danquarius Franklin. Again, nothing happens in a vacuum.
Shortly after Franklin's death, the police department cleared their officer of wrongdoing. But last February, an independent review board came to a different conclusion.
This evening, the Citizens Review Board voted 7-0 that a preponderance of the evidence demonstrated that CMPD clearly erred in finding the Franklin shooting justified. The CRB will be preparing a letter to the Franklin family and CMPD that confirms this result.
For only the second time in history, the city's Citizen Review Board was siding with the victim and not the police. And since Franklin's death, the city no longer lets police investigate their own shootings. A sign that the culture may actually be shifting. But for the people in Charlotte who voted for new leadership, it could be a long road to the change they want to see.
Truly says a generational force over here. Let's stop it. We gotta do something about it.
How many people have been killed in Charlotte by the hands of the police? Do I think as a city it's gonna get better? I'm hopeful, wishful.
Certainly when you do bring in black leadership, it creates a potential, but I'm not complacent in that. I also understand that there's a system that has been groomed over 400 years that is deeper than any one political figure.
I, and then your name.
I, Braxton Winston. This is about systems changing. And culture is how you do what you do. And you can organize person to person and group to group. Those are great. But we are a culture of laws and policy. And if you really want to change culture, you have to change those laws and policies.